Hello and welcome. Good afternoon for those of you on the East Coast and good morning for those who might be on the West Coast. My name is Matt Kidd. I'm an MBA from the class of 2011 and I'm a committee member of the LGBT plus alumni group. This event is hosted by the Black and Latino alumni group and the LGBT alumni groups. So we're thrilled to have you with us for this virtual event. I'm excited to join my fellow panelists here to talk about joining nonprofit boards and what that's like. A few quick notes for the Stern alumni community with us. Our alumni group organizes a variety of programming throughout the year, and you can find out about that future programming by plugging onto the Stern network or any of the social media platforms. During times like this, during COVID, our community becomes even more important for alumni and students alike, so please stay tuned to what's coming forward. One quick housekeeping rule too, you will notice that the chat function is not working, but we are taking questions through the Q&A feature. We'll answer the questions towards the end of this session, so please make use of that as it makes sense for you. And with that, thank you for joining us, and I would like to pass it off to Cynthia Remec, Executive Director and Founder of BoardAssist, who will be moderating our panel.
Matt, thank you so much. And a big thank you to everybody in the Stern community that helped put together this terrific webinar for today. We're so excited to be here with all of you who are dialing in and with this fabulous panel. We couldn't be more excited. So, and we've got lots of great stuff to cover. So I'm very excited to get started. Let me introduce you to our terrific panelists. We have with us Ashish Contractor, who is a managing director at Moelis & Company, where he focuses on M&A for pharma, biotech, and other life science companies. Prior to Moelis, Ashish worked at Greenhill & Company, where he started his career at Lehman. Ashish is on the board of the American India Foundation and also of Rescuing Leftover Cuisine, where he has served as the board co-chair for the last 3 years. He lives in New York City, in Manhattan, with his wife, also a Stern alum, and his 3 children. And my favorite fact about Ashish, he found both of his boards through BoardAssist. So he's our star placement. He makes us look great every day, and we love that. Also, a terrific BoardAssist placement that we are so thrilled to have with us today is Georgia Forbes. She's the founder of Coral Consulting, a consulting and software development firm that focuses on small to mid-sized businesses. She's also the founder and executive director of Ionic 6, Inc., which was founded in 2014. Ionic 6 is a nonprofit that provides STEM programs for underserved middle school students. She has served on the board of the Brooklyn Ballet, the Hope Center Development Corporation, and performs various forms of community outreach. We also have with us Djena Graves. She's formerly a vice president at Partners Group and is the current board chair of the African American Museum of Performing Arts. She's previously served on the boards of other notable organizations, including Success Academy, Girls Education and Mentoring Services, which a lot of people call GEMS, and the Association for Corporate Growth's New York chapter. Of course, all 3 are Stern alum. And our last panelist today is Matt Kidd, who you've already met, who is the former executive director of Reaching Out MBA and has served as a board member at the Greater Boston Business Council. So as you can see, it's a pretty great panel. A few quick words about me, but more importantly about BoardAssist. And I just want to say before I talk too much about BoardAssist, this is not about BoardAssist. This is about finding an amazing board for all the Stern alum who are watching with us today and watching our recording later. But I do want to just give you like a few quick things that you should know as you're thinking about how do I find my dream board? How do I make sure it's going to be a perfect fit? So in terms of who I am, I'm a former lawyer and I'm the founder and executive director of BoardAssist, which is itself a nonprofit. We're New York's leading personalized board matching service. We find high impact New Yorkers, like everybody who's with us today, watching and on this panel for board service. And 2 metrics that I'd like to share that I'm very proud of, but are also very relevant to our talk today. Over 93% of the people that we place on boards are serving as leaders on those boards, like Ashish, within 12 months of being placed. That's really important, and we're going to keep coming back to that in this panel, because what this panel is about is making sure you find a board where you can really engage and not just write a check, where you can really become an engaged board leader. That's what people want when you go on a board. You don't want to just sit there and write a check. And so we're going to be covering, like, how do you make sure that you do find that board where you can truly engage? And that's why we're proud of that metric. We're also very proud of the metric that we have now raised over $125 million for the nonprofit community through our placements over the last 20 years. And we're going to talk about money on this panel as well, because that is a piece of board service, and you should understand how much of a piece of board service that's going to be and what's your comfort level with what's going to be expected of you. One last metric that I always like to open any panel discussion about board service about, and it's a big surprise to a lot of people. 1.8 million nonprofit board seats open up in the United States every single year. I know we have people who are calling from outside the country. I'm sure it's very similar wherever you're located. I only know the US number is 1.8 million. I bring that number up because what it says to you is that you need to be picky and really think through before you join a board. When your stern roommate says, "Hey, Georgia, you want to go on this board with me? It's for Alzheimer's." And Georgia's thinking, well, Alzheimer's is a terrible thing. I'd love to help with that. But I have a relative who has leukemia. I'd really be more interested in joining the leukemia board. Finding that perfect fit is going to make you the very best board member you can be. And once you know that there are 1.8 million nonprofit board seats opening up every single year, that says to you that you're in the driver's seat. You should be asking questions, and you should figure out what's perfect for you, because that perfect fit is going to then make you the best board member you can be. Two last housekeeping items. I know that people are going to have to leave early. They may have to come on late. You may be dealing with children who are at home. So just two resources for you to know about that are free resources that we hope will help you as you're thinking about how to find that perfect fit now that you know you're in the driver's seat. If you go on YouTube and you search for the word BoardAssist, one word, you'll find a short video that we put together that covers what to think about before you join a board. So I hope that you'll enjoy watching that, and that could be a good tool for you. The other thing is, if you go on the BoardAssist website, which is boardassist.org, under the FAQ, Frequently Asked Questions tab, which is at the top of every page of the website, you can click that and get to our booklet called Giving Back, which is a short little booklet you can download for free on everything to think about before you join a board. So it's going to cover all the things that we're talking about today and more, because we only have 90 minutes. So with that housekeeping out of the way, let's dive in. So first question, how was your experience finding a nonprofit board to serve as a board member of? How did that experience go for any of you? Matt, you didn't work with BoardAssist, so maybe we should start with you.
Sure. So at this point, I've served on actually 3 boards over my professional career, and I have to say, I maybe am a non-typical person here in that I kind of fell into each situation. They were all organizations that, with one exception, I'd really been involved with before, and then was kind of asked to come over and play a larger role with the organization. The exception of that actually is with the Greater Boston Business Council. It was something that my boss at the time was on and no longer could do, and kind of passed the torch off to me. So that kind of was more of a professional thing for the organization that I was with before. But I've never found finding a board necessarily to be difficult. And in fact, I'm now at the point where I think, to what Cynthia said, you really have to think about, is your connection to the organization right? I've since been approached by 2 or 3 organizations that have asked if I'd be interested in joining. And for a number of reasons, I've kind of held off a little bit on joining another board. And part of that is it's not a right match. And then sometimes also it's, what does the board really need at the time? And right now I'm on a professional paternity gap. I've got 2 2-year-olds. And one of the organizations that approached me, and we might talk about this later, but it was an organization that didn't really have a staff So there you're looking at more of an operational board versus an oversight and fundraising board. And what the energy and time that you need to dedicate to a smaller nonprofit where there's not a staff is very, very different from what you need with a staffed organization. And so for my personal circumstances right now, that didn't make sense.
Well, Matt, you brought up two things that are so important for our audience to hear. One is like sometimes you really, the fit is perfect in terms of mission.
So Georgia, I'll speak to that as I was.
So sometimes the fit can really be perfect with
Can you hear me?
Yes. Did you want to say something, Djena?
Okay, I was going to share my story on that as well in terms of finding a board. So in one instance, I was very deliberate. I had never been on a not-for-profit board. I was kind of in the point in my career where I thought that was the reasonable next step, and it's something that I really wanted to do. So I participated in a board training program, which was kind of meant to train, I guess, first-time board members. And then at the end of the program, it was maybe 6 weeks of, insights in terms of things that you need to know. At the end of the program, they shared with us a list of boards in New York City that were looking for members. I scoured the board, again, looked for alignment between my own personal values and interests, and ended up interviewing and getting on that first board. That was the Girls Educational and Mentoring Services. The next board that I got on basically was a call from a friend who happened to know, has heard me talk about education and the importance of education and the disparities in quality of education, and became aware of an opportunity with Success Academy and shared that with me and connected me. So it's really, part for me, it was part being proactive, one part being proactive in the first instance, and then the second part just friends and family knowing my personal interests and connecting me thereof. So I would recommend people speak about. They're probably naturally speaking about things that they care about with their friends and family anyway. And so that certainly is a good source as well.
So before turning this over to Georgia and Ashish with the same question, because it's an important one, and I'm not going to repeat all the questions with everyone, but I do think this is an important one. I just wanted to finish up what I was saying, that the 2 points that Matt brought up that were very important points that I really wanted to highlight for the audience. He talked about sometimes the mission is a perfect fit for you, but it's still not the right fit because it's perhaps that they're in startup mode and you're looking for something more established, or they meet at 8 o'clock in the morning and you're a trader and you're never going to be able to get to 8 o'clock in the morning meetings, and you're looking at 2 different charter schools and one meets at 5 in the afternoon and one meets at 8 in the morning. So you have to look beyond just the mission. The mission can be incredibly perfect, but if the other pieces of the puzzle aren't there, it's not going to be a great fit. So I'm so glad he brought that up. The other thing that Matt brought up that was so important is this whole idea of joining a startup versus an established board. So everybody loves the idea of joining a startup board because it seems like you'll be able to be really hands-on, and that's going to be terrific, and you won't just be writing checks. It's going to be a really engaged board role. But Matt brilliantly pointed out, sometimes it's not such a great fit because you become the staff. There is no, a very limited staff. And so Ashish is raising his hand because I put him on a board that has evolved a lot, but he's been there since, as it's gone through a lot of different places in their life cycle. And it can be very exciting to join a startup organization, but as Matt points out, you have to keep in mind that there's going to be less people there to move a project forward, and the only person who may be able to move that project forward may be you. Corollary I would also just point out is don't knock out the boards that are huge boards where they have a budget of $500 million a year, and you're thinking, wow, there won't be a way for me to engage there, because a large board that is very well run with a smart executive director who knows how to engage the board can be just as hands-on as a startup board. So don't, ask those questions in your interview process. How engaged do board members have a chance to be if it's a larger board? But think about what Matt said about if it's a small startup, who is actually doing the work, and are you ready to sign up for that? Georgia, what do you want to say about the process to how you came to all your boards?
I've had a mixed experience with my boards. The first one, I also fell into. It was an organization that I volunteered with. I saw the work they were doing, and there was an opportunity that opened up on the board, and I was invited to join, which I did with pleasure, because outside of the volunteer work I was doing, there was also an alignment in terms of the value that I could bring to the board and a different perspective and just opportunities for how they'd be able to grow and expand. Afterwards, I proactively searched for a board to join, and I actually had a bit of a challenge there. I spoke with colleagues and friends. I even reached out independently to a couple of organizations that I was interested in or I thought would be a good fit. But after having preliminary conversations and even engaging with some of the board members or the responsibilities, the time, there just wasn't really a good fit in the end. And actually, that was when I came across BoardAssist and reached out, completed the profile. And I think we actually went through a couple of options, Cynthia, before I found the one that was correct for me. For me, it was really important that I found a board with a good fit. In terms of looking for them, I knew what areas I wanted to focus on or what industry I wanted the nonprofit to be a part of. And I also knew what I wanted to bring to the table and what I was looking for, which might have been why it was a little bit of a challenge for me to find an organization that kind of aligned completely. But I do think it's really important when serving a board, if you are a part of it, that it's going to be a huge commitment on your time as well as financially. And I think one of the primary reasons for, at least for me, for joining a board was being able to have impact, right? Wanting to be a part of an organization that was affecting change and looking at how I'd be able to contribute to that change as well. So I didn't mind taking the time to go through that journey. And I'd say it probably took me almost a year the second time to identify an organization that I thought aligned with the values that I had, as well as where I saw that I'd have an opportunity to be beneficial or instrumental to the work they were doing.
That's so helpful, Georgia, and you covered so many things that I'm so glad. I wanted to make sure it got covered today, so like we can all go home now. Georgia said everything that we needed to know. bravo to Georgia. But before I ask this question to Ashish, I just want to say, highlight what Georgia said about comparing and contrasting. If it's at all possible, if you're working with BoardAssist, and by the way, we're happy to work with everybody on this call and we charge nothing, we're a nonprofit. But if you're doing this on your own, try to talk to at least 2 boards for comparison, because the first board you meet with, like nonprofit executive directors, we're very excited about our work. And so you meet with us and we're going to get you excited too, because this is what we do. We're so excited about what we're doing. And it's not until you've met 2 or 3 executive directors and 2 or 3 board chairs that you start to realize, wow, I really had a better fit with this other person. So it is worth putting in the time to make that comparison. And, you know, it can be a little bit uncomfortable when it is that roommate of yours from college who reaches out and asks you to do a board when you say, wait, hold on. And then you go look for something else for comparison just so you can make sure you're making a good choice. But Georgia's right. You have to, you know, it's so worth it. And she also brought up something really great, which is everyone's always asking, how do you make sure that you're joining a board where you can really engage? So what we always tell everybody is every person you meet in the board interviewing process, the executive director, the nominating chair, the board chair, ask everybody you meet along the way, can you give me 3 examples of things people have done on your board in the last 12 months other than fundraise? And if each person you meet along the way, and Matt's shaking his head, he knows this is how it goes. Each person along the way can't give you 3 examples, and they're kind of stumbling and they're like, well, they got their company to donate 10 computers. Okay, that's still fundraising. Oh, they had a fundraiser at their apartment. That's fundraising. You want them to be able to tick off things that the board has done other than just fundraise. And keep asking that question with everybody you meet along the way, and see how quickly it takes them to respond and how substantively they can respond.
Hey, Cynthia, one thing I'd actually add to what you're saying is you might even ask what the organization is really focusing on right now. Because, for example, if you're about to go through a big strategic plan and you're a consulting background, that means you're going to be used much more heavily than, for example, if you were an accountant, you might still work on the financials, but that strategy person is actually going to be really important going forward.
That's such a great point. Ashish, how about your process to finding your boards?
No, absolutely. And, later on in the conversation, I'd love to come back to kind of startup board versus more established board and some of the pitfalls and things I learned. But, I'd say my experience was a little bit different. I had no idea how to approach this. I was interested, broadly speaking, in contributing more, in joining a nonprofit board. As Djena mentioned, for her, I thought it was the right time in my personal and professional development that was the right next step. And I thought it would be a good thing to do. I had been approached kind of a one-off by a couple of people, but I had no idea of any kind of systematic approach to evaluate different boards. I had no idea where I would even find that information. I didn't know the things I should be looking for, the time commitment, the financial commitment. And I knew it existed out there, but it just wasn't readily apparent to me in kind of what I did in my day-to-day life. So Cynthia, obviously we've worked together, and I thought BoardAssist with their emails was just a great way to start, in that it's systematized. Here are, hundreds of different nonprofits that by kind of social impact or mission that you can kind of sort through, and you can get a sense of different missions. And everyone is altruistic. Everyone feels good, but you can get a sense of what resonates more with you personally, as well as the two big things that are kind of gating items before joining a nonprofit board. The price point, because there are wonderful boards out there, and as Cynthia mentioned, and I wholeheartedly agree, as alums and as professionals, we're sort of in the driver's seat. There's lots of people that would love kind of our nonprofit services and contributions and willingness and ability to contribute, but they're all at varying different price points. And so something that may sound like the coolest thing in the world might be at a price point that's just unattainable, or it doesn't work. And so having a way just to sort through it and kind of narrow the funnel a little bit, I thought for me personally was incredibly helpful, and helped ground me in what I was looking to do, and then seeing what sort of the time commitment was. So for me, for my search, it was, though I had been approached one-off, getting that venue, I found it with BoardAssist and whatever service you use, or email or Google searches you do, but finding a way to sort through and narrow the funnel of a couple, and then approaching a few to compare and contrast, because see where that fit and would resonate with you, I thought was incredibly important, and has since made now that I've joined another board, that process all the more easier, because I know. But I would think, like a lot of people on this phone that have a concept of joining a nonprofit board, the act of actually finding one and systematizing it is very amorphous. So how to approach it was very important to me.
Ashish, thank you. And it's almost like you were a plant in the audience, because I did want to talk about those two funnel points for a minute and bring the panel in on them, because they are so important. And as Ashish points out, you have to have the conversation about the financial and time commitment before you spend a lot of time talking to a board. So I'm going to say some things briefly, just at a minimum that you want to be thinking about with your financial and time commitment, and then let's have the panel chime in and add to that. On the financial commitment, which we talk a lot about in our little booklet, which I pointed to you to before from the FAQ tab of the website, boardassist.org, top of every page, we talk for pages and pages about the give and the get. There's two pieces to serving on a board. The give is what you personally give. The get is what you get from others, whether it's Georgia selling tickets to the Brooklyn Ballet, whether it's selling a journal ad, whether it's getting a company match, whatever you bring in that you didn't give is called the get. You'll see us talk about in the book, they're not necessarily interchangeable. So if Djena is asked to join a board with a get of $5,000 a year, that doesn't necessarily mean that she can come on and write a check for $5,000 and be done. They may want her to still go out and get, even though she hit her net number of give plus get. The corollary is she might bring in a huge grant that's twice as much as what she committed to get a year, but she hasn't personally made a donation. So you need to understand the give, the get, and whether they're interchangeable. Before you start talking to a nonprofit, you want to get this number and get it in writing. You may be looking at a small nonprofit and think, oh, how much money could it be? I'm sure I'll be able to afford it. And then you will be very, very surprised that this tiny nonprofit that has a budget of $50,000 a year thinks that you're going to give $25,000 a year. Like, I've seen that happen. You may also be really afraid of some like huge household name and think, oh gosh, I won't be able to afford to be on that board. Well, that board might only want like $1,000 a year. So don't necessarily assume you know what the give get is. Ask before you spend a lot of time talking to an organization, find out what it is and get it in writing. Understand the two pieces, give versus get. Find out how much you're being asked to give and get vis-a-vis everybody else on the board. Is everybody else grandfathered in and now they've decided because of COVID they need more money, and so new board members give $10,000 a year, but the old people all give $1,000 a year. So the new guy coming in from Goldman gives $10,000, but the Morgan Stanley partner who's been on for 5 years gives $1,000. So you want to understand, are you being asked to give more or less than everyone? And kind of the corollary of that is, because of that 1.8 million number we talked about, where they really want you, you're Stern alum, you're great, they want to have you on the board. So they say, hey, Georgia, not to worry, give a number that's just like whatever is personally significant to you. That's going to be fine with us. No. Do not join a board that asks you to give something personally significant or make you one of their top 3 philanthropic donations that you make annually, because they're looking at Djena and they're saying, well, she has a big job. So what's personally significant to her is probably $10,000 a year. They don't realize that Djena has all these other things she's giving money to, and she was planning on giving $5,000 a year. So her idea of personally significant could be very different than their idea of personally significant. So we in general don't think personally significant is a good way to go, or top 3. You want them to spell out what is that number, that total give plus get number, and get an understanding of it, and understand, if they tell you, Matt, you're so great, we love you, we need more Stern alum on this board, you can come in at 1,000. And Matt says, well, what does everybody else give? Well, everybody else goes like 25,000, but for you, Matt, it's a special thing, we really need you, it's 1,000. I would be very concerned about that, because what that happens a lot of the time is they're trying to get Matt on the board after he's been there for a year or two. They're like, Matt, everyone else does 25,000. It's kind of like, could you step it up a little bit? So if you're getting something dramatically less than everybody else or dramatically more, you want to understand why that is. And you're entitled to have that information as what are you being asked to give versus everybody else. It could be a very legitimate reason. You are the only social media person coming on that board. Everybody else is a banker. They really need you. And so it's fine that you're paying less, but you do want to understand what that is. The other big funnel that Ashish talked about is the time commitment. And before I pass this around so we can talk about both the financial and time commitment and what people wish they knew before they joined their board, is on the time commitment, just think about it in several different pieces. Where do you physically need to meet when COVID is over? A big trip that nonprofits are playing right now because they want you. You're fabulous Stern alum. Who wouldn't want you? So they're going to tell you, no problem. You can come in by Zoom to all the board meetings. Make sure you ask, well, what about when the pandemic's over? Do I need to go to this charter school in the Bronx at noon once a month? And I work downtown. I don't know how that's going to work. So find out where will the board be meeting when the pandemic is over? Not where they meet now, but after the pandemic is over. And will you be allowed to participate by Zoom if you can't be there? And then the other question you want to ask, because they're going to say yes, because they want you. You're going to say, well, how many other people participate by Zoom? Because if you're the only one who's participating by Zoom and not showing up in person, you're not really going to be part of the fabric of the board. And then you're not going to be able to get things done, because you're going to, who's this Matt guy? He never shows up. Now all of a sudden he has this project he wants us all to work on. We've never even seen him other than by Zoom. So find out if everybody else is Zooming in or not. Find out when the board meets, what time of day. Again, if you're a trader, a board that meets at 8 o'clock in the morning is not going to be great for you. Does it meet in the middle of the day? Like, what time of day does it meet? It's super nitpicky thing, but this can make or break your board experience if you're never going to get to the board meetings. How often do they meet? Do you have to serve on a subcommittee? Because most boards will ask you to serve on at least one or maybe even 2 committees. How often do they meet? At what time of day? At what location? So push hard on this time commitment. And I would urge you, before you start talking to your roommate who said, hey, I really want you to be on this board with me, just get these little housekeeping things out of the way, because everyone is going to be very disappointed if you meet with 2 or 3 people and they've fallen in love with you and they're like, Ashish, we're ready. When are you joining? And then Ashish finds out that the board meetings are at noon, and there's some location that he's never going to be able to get to at noon, and they're every 2 weeks, which is probably not going to work with his schedule, because as we know, he's got kids, he's got a job, he's got a stern wife, and maybe in both senses of the word. But the point is, you really want to understand the commitment. Matt, what would you add to that in terms of like things you want to find out with that funnel?
Yeah, I mean, so as I have this conversation, I think about it a little bit from the board point of view, but also from an executive director point of view, because I've actually been on both sides of that. I think that one thing for people to keep in mind here about something that you said is that boards also have to think about what their composition looks like, what their gaps are. And that applies in many different ways. It could be a professional gap, but it could also be demographic gaps. I think about like our experience with Reaching Out MBA. One of the things as an organization mission-wise that we were really trying to grow into was to develop programming and initiatives that would bring more LGBT identifying women into business school and business in general. Well, our board, when I first started, was like 80% male identifying. And so clearly, if this is something that we're looking to do as an organization, that needed to change. And so that was a demographic goal that we had. And by the time that I left, we were actually 60% female identifying, which kind of reflects that. But that's something to keep in mind, is that for better or worse, a board doesn't just want anybody who, might have a professional skill and might be able to write a check. It sometimes goes beyond that. And then the other thing too is to think about what your expectations are as you go into a board role, particularly if it's a later stage staffed organization. Realistically, a board, when you're at that stage, has maybe 3 objectives: hire and fire the executive director, make sure that the financials are in shape, and that includes making donations, but also having financial oversight that there's not misspending, stuff like that going on. And then the third is, in tandem with that executive leadership, to set the overall strategic objective of the organization. If you're expecting to go in there and say, the day-to-day, this is how I think we should be marketing on this platform, you really should be thinking about a different kind of nonprofit board. You should be thinking about more of an operational, early stage startup nonprofit board than one that's staffed. So that's something I would say really, really investigate and make sure that's there. And then also beyond, whether you get along with the executive director, each board has a culture. It's really no different from your workplace, your friend group, something like that. And think about whether you fit in there. And sometimes there are cultural mismatches. I experienced it with 1 or 2 board directors during my time, and it's unfortunate. And sometimes you can bridge that, but sometimes you just make a misstep. So really investigate that culture of what it's like with the board. Speak to more people than just the executive director and the chair of the board.
And that's so helpful. And Ashish, I know you wanted to hop in on that startup versus established question.
Yeah. So for me, when I was thinking of joining my first board, the first thing that was most important to me was I didn't want to just join a board to meet three calls a year and just write a big check. I felt that could be anyone, and I wanted to join something where I would make more of an impact and difference. So I was more deliberate in my searching for that and found something that kind of resonated with me. The flip side is there are trade-offs with a more startup board that Matt alluded to, and I found those out head on in that, as Matt rightly pointed out, there's more operational involvement with more of a startup board, and there's a whole mentality shift that's obvious to everyone, but you get close up. Most people on this phone are successful professionals and used to working on cross-functional project teams. And when things have to get done, they get done, and their counterparties are professionals that get things done. You're dealing in a nonprofit world, and your expectations for work hours, commitment, deliverables for nonprofit staff that are doing things are very different. They're just used to different deliverables and timings and cadence. But more importantly, the cross-functional team you're usually working with is other nonprofit board members who have different jobs, commitments, lives, different ways of doing things. They're doing this out of the goodness of their heart. They're not getting paid for this. And so your ability to impact change, to get things done quickly, to not just say, oh, we should do this and it magically happens, is very different in a less established board. It's rewarding, it is far more impactful, but it requires a slightly different skill set of coalescing people, getting people to move in certain directions, and realizing that if there are 10 things that should be done, a win is getting 4 of them done over a quarter or two, because it's just impossible with the resources to get them all done. That can be really gratifying for people, or it can be incredibly frustrating for a lot of people who are used to instant gratification. And so, the first sort for people is, hey, what organization appeals to me, which makes sense. The second sort that I think people should walk through is, what's the price point? As Cynthia had mentioned, the give-get amount, because it can be a wonderful organization, but if they're expecting $100,000 a year, I mean, that's not, depending on what situation in life you are, right? That may not be realistic. Or is it a price point that you can afford? And the third sort to me is the time commitment. I, for one, have kind of 2 boards that I'm on. One is a more involved board where it's more startup or transitioning post-startup mode, where it's a heavier time commitment. And the other board is less of a time commitment. It's not simply writing checks and sitting on a board, but it's much more relaxed. And I think finding that balance and understanding what you can give with your time is super important. And are you going to be okay with if only 5 things get done instead of 10 things get done? And that's an important thing to measure when you weigh different alternatives.
So that's so helpful. And before we go back to talking about like more things you should be thinking about in the board interviewing process, Ashish raised something that I do want to make sure that we talk about for a second now, because it's important. And that is that often if you join a startup board, you are, as Ashish mentioned, you're going to be able to perform all sorts of functions that you would never have gotten to perform with a larger organization. And more importantly, that you may not get to perform in your current day job. So if you're like, 5 years out of Stern and you're working at, BCG, or you're working at Goldman Sachs, you're working at some big company, you're kind of at an early point in your career. Sometimes joining a board, and not necessarily even a startup board, any board, you'll have an opportunity to develop certain skills that you don't get to develop in your day job yet, like presentation skills or marketing skills, something you don't get to do. So with that in mind, one of the things we want to talk about today, Georgia, why don't we start with you? What sort of skills have you picked up through board service that you wouldn't otherwise have picked up in your day job?
My background is primarily financial and technical. So those are really the areas that I focus on in terms of sort of my day-to-day. In joining some of my boards, I was actually able to work a little bit more on my creative side, which is not skill sets that I would typically apply in sort of my day-to-day responsibilities. So with Brooklyn Ballet, it being the performing arts, a lot of the activities, even outside of fundraising, was really how do we engage our community more? How do we increase the diversity of our participants? How do we connect with the community that we're a part of? And just to give a little more context, historically, like with ballet and those types of performing arts, you don't typically see a lot of minorities represented in these types of performances. And one of the things that I did really appreciate about Brooklyn Ballet is that diversity was actually a key focus for what they were doing and their outreach. So it actually gave me an opportunity, one, to utilize my understanding in terms of what are things that will connect with the target audience that that we were working with, versus in conjunction with Brooklyn Ballet's goals. So I would say some of my marketing and creative skills were something that came into play. And with another board that I worked with, which was around community outreach and providing different services and programs for the community, I actually leveraged a little bit more of my communication skills there. And again, it's around finding different ways of doing things and still making it effective. So that was actually really fun for me because it's a space where, one, I didn't get to utilize very often as much as I appreciate the arts. I'm not very good at it. I can't go up and do a dance performance, but I love it, right? I love arts. And it was really good for me to get a way to be involved there. So some of those softer creative skills, which was a complete opposite of the dynamics of my work environment, was what working with a board really gave me the opportunity to explore.
So I love that. And, this is one of the things we always tell candidates when they come to us. And in the book I keep talking about, you'll see a discussion about this. You could be a lawyer during the day or an accountant during the day. That doesn't mean that has to be your board role, or you have to join an organization that's somehow in the legal or financial space. You could have been in the Peace Corps right after you left Stern, before you took this big job at BCG or wherever you are, and you would really enjoy going back to being on a board with a lot of social workers and people different than your day job. Or it could be a situation where when you were at NYU, you were in a rock band, but now you're a doctor. This is your opportunity then to join a board where there are musicians and playwrights and producers that just so different from your day job. So I'm glad Georgia brought that up. In addition to getting to use skills that you don't get to use in your day job, you can be around people who are completely different than the people in your day job. And that can be great. Djena, for you, were there any skills you got to use on your various boards that you had not gotten to use during your day job?
Yeah, absolutely. So I too work in the finance area, very kind of regimented.
Well, Djena, you froze. Uh-oh.
So why don't I can jump in real quick. Djena, are you back?
Am I okay?
You are.
Am I okay? Can you hear me? Okay, great. Sorry, apologies. I was saying that one of the other board members for the GEMS board was a film producer, and actually was the person that ended up creating a documentary film of what we were doing. And so it was very exciting to kind of be part of the launch process for that film and kind of expanding the reach and platform of what we were doing and basically servicing girls who have been commercially sexually exploited, which is a topic, and trafficking is a huge issue globally. People aren't really aware that it happens here in the US as well, and it was really fundamental to be part of that. We also ended up hosting a lot of events. And so it was a really fun exercise, frankly, from what I did in my day job, to be able to be involved in something so artistic that also drove the mission, what we were doing. And in fact, when I left the board, I was actually replaced by a friend of mine who was introduced to the organization through some of these events. So it was, a really good way to spend time doing good, but also having fun and being exposed to a world that I had previously not been exposed to.
A question that people submitted that merits discussion, although I think we've somewhat answered it, is some people have a concern that if you're not a finance person, you would not be comfortable on a board, because how would you be able to contribute? So maybe some of the ways, can we talk about some of the ways you contribute other than, not, when I say financially, not just writing a check, but also being part of financial oversight, some of the other roles that you've played in your boards unrelated to either writing checks or fiscal management?
I can quickly, I have a quick response to that. So for example, in the AMPA board, which is a little bit more of a startup board at this point, we're very kind of thoughtful right now, frankly, in terms of what skill sets we're looking for. And I know that, people with legal experience is an important thing that boards need in terms of, some of the structures and operations that we're going to be doing. We will be helpful to have some with legal expertise. Also, we're also looking for folks that have social media influence, and marketing experience is huge, frankly. All organizations, or many organizations, are looking to expand their platforms, expand their reach, and marketing experience is definitely critical as well. So I think there's a wide variety, frankly, of skill sets that we're looking for, and that, people who have those experiences would be very valuable for many organizations.
Yeah, I think there are two things I'd mentioned to pick up of what Djena said. The first is, as Stern alums, I would assume the vast majority of people were in some sort of financial services or finance and accounting background. That's not everyone, but that's a lot of people. And a lot of us on the phone and in this webinar probably have a financial services, whether it's trading, banking, hedge funds, private equity, kind of bent to what we do. It's a highly insular world, as I'm sure we all know. And one of the nice gratifying things with nonprofit boards is there's a whole nother world and universe out there that you don't get to interact and touch and feel as much. And being a part of a nonprofit board, you get to meet people, different functional areas, different industries that you wouldn't come across every time. And that's extremely gratifying. To that end, I know with the boards I'm associated with, when we try to recruit people, in a perfect world, it's exactly as Djena said, which is you look to find gaps on a board and to fill with experience, social media, legal, something like that. But frankly, for a lot of boards, especially those more in the startup mode, you just want someone that's passionate and committed. It's okay if they have a financial services background, that's fine. They can still be involved in marketing or some other cross-functional thing. As long as they're passionate, committed, willing to donate time, everyone is smart, everyone is educated, they can contribute. And if there's a gap, we could fill it later. For a lot of the boards, that's what's missing. It's just not rocket science what's needed. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit. The problem with a lot of these boards are there's just not enough resources and time to get to everything. And so finding board members, regardless of their experience, that are passionate, committed, that can do the work, they're willing to take on an extra project is more important. And there are ways to contribute. I'm at a food rescue organization interacting with restaurants or food donors or food partners or marketing or corporate governance. There's ways other than finance to kind of interact on these organizations.
And that's such an important point too. A lot of times people will come to us looking for a board and they'll say, well, what am I going to do on that board exactly? And I'll answer it the way Ashish just answered it, is that if you have a passion for the organization, you'll join the board and you'll be hearing them talking about some project and you'll be the one to raise your hand. And even though you're a finance person, the next thing you know, you're the one managing the website redesign project because you're the one who is willing to take that project on and works with the outside web designer, and you know how to get things done and pull in feedback from different constituents and figure out how to move a project forward. So, in addition to getting to work with people who have completely different skill sets than people you work with during your day. Another thing I would add that's great about board service is that you get to work with people at a different level than you might during your day. So you're somebody that's 5 to 10 years out of college and you're working at work mainly with people who sort of that same age group or level of experience. And now all of a sudden you're on a board and you're working with people who are running Fortune, 200 companies. They're on that board with you and you're getting to work with them very closely on a project, which you would never get to do in your own company. We worked with an organization a few years ago where the board chair was the head of the New York Times, Pinch Sulzberger at the time. We had Bob Iger, who was running Disney, on the board. We had the head of 5 other major media companies. And I put a third-year associate from Goldman Sachs in the media group on that board. And it was like a dream for him that he would never have had an opportunity to work with Bob Iger and Pinch Sulzberger. But you can often, through board service, have an opportunity to work with people who are so much more senior than you would during your day job. And that can be great. How about some other perks of board service that you all have enjoyed professionally and personally? Okay, well, while you guys are thinking about that, I'll jump in with, here's some other things to be thinking about before, some more funnel questions. When you're talking to boards, you want to be asking, why are you adding right now? You want to take a good look, as somebody said earlier about the board culture, that's so important. So take a look at who else is on the board. Go to the website of that organization. Most websites now have a list, probably with a short board bio of each board member, but also go on LinkedIn for every person on that board and see, who do they know that you know? Maybe they know 20 people that you really don't like that much. Well, maybe this is like, if they know 20 people you don't like that much, maybe this is someone you're not going to like that much. Obviously, the corollary is you go on and everybody on LinkedIn is somebody who's friends with a lot of people you like. One, you can call those people, but two, you can also feel good, like they're chums with a lot of people I like. So that's probably great. Why are they adding right now? If it is a board with like 40 people and they're adding another 5 people, that is almost definitely a situation where they're just looking for more money, because nobody needs a board with 45 people. So if they're adding now and there's 40 people, you want to push really, really hard on, why are you adding at this time? There could be a legitimate reason. They have no diversity on the board. They have no next generation coming on the board. Everybody's in their 80s and is about to retire, or they never did anything about generational diversity. They don't have the social media person, and you're going to be the social media person. But who knows why it is that they're adding, but you definitely want to ask that question. You want to ask about board turnover. That is such an important question, and you're entitled to ask that, and don't be embarrassed to ask that question of, there could, if the whole board has resigned in the last 12 months, okay, maybe there's a very good reason. Nobody liked the old executive director, and now they brought in Matt and they have a great new executive director and everything's good now. But maybe there's a problem there that hasn't been addressed. So you want to understand about that. Other sort of funnel questions that people wish that they had asked before they joined their boards.
I would always look at the 990s. So financial reports for organizations are publicly available. They're called 990s. There are websites like GuideStar that you can use to look them up. See what the financial condition of the organization is. And then also from kind of that same risk profile, you probably should investigate, is the organization in good standing? Is anybody suing the organization? Do you have DO&E insurance to protect the board? What does that look like to make sure you're not taking on undue liability? I would say is actually a pretty important step to take.
So what Matt alluded to is there's a fabulous website called guidestar.org. They are themselves a nonprofit, and you can pull all the 990s for any U.S. nonprofit there. And you'll have to create an account, but it is free to create an account. So guidestar.org, it's a really great tool for you as you're talking to boards. What would others add as things that they wish they had known before they joined their boards?
So I think for me, I had asked kind of general questions over time commitments and stuff, but I think, more specificity on, are you going to be required to join a subcommittee? Are you going to have a project? What are the deliverables and how are you going to be measured on board performance on a year-to-year basis? In retrospect, I should have asked more questions about that versus more generalities over things. I didn't know what a 999. That's the first time I've heard about it. That sounds like a great question. I asked for general financial performance, but I didn't know things like that existed. So, having those benchmarks would be great. The other thing that I spent time talking about was, what was the vision over the next year or two? Where did the organization, where was it now, and where did it want to be? And did I feel I could be impactful to helping it get there? That was super important to me, to find something that would be something the right fit. And if I just may add one more point, one of your earlier questions, Cynthia, sort of what are the perks that you got, or what are the things you liked? I think for a lot of people on the phone, I would imagine joining a nonprofit board, obviously everyone wants to do it out of social goodwill. They're altruistic. They want to make an impact and give back, which would be the principal reason. I'm sure professionally joining boards also looks good. It's access to a different network and a different realm of people. Not every board has Bob Iger on it, but that would be great if it did. But it's access to different professionals and high-powered professionals that you wouldn't necessarily interact with. But I think also what was nice for me, and again, I mentioned this point, especially coming from NYU Stern and being in financial services, it tends to be a more insular world that you deal with. And I think expanding your personal network, I deal with people on my organizations that are chefs and hospitality managers and, different people that work at different media companies and do things just completely different that I just wouldn't ordinarily interact with on a day-to-day basis. It's great. It's very satisfying to have different lenses and views and broaden the network. So yes, professional matters. And having a nice prestigious organization that you can network with, sure. And that's definitely there for everyone. But expanding your personal network is also pretty important as well.
Along the same lines of some of the points Ashish mentioned, I know further along as I learned a little bit more about how to, conduct my interviews with potential board I was interested in, I learned to find out how did the board think that I would be an asset to them. So the same manner in which you are interested in that board for whatever reason, the strategy, their impact, there's a reason that board is also interested in you and may think that you may be a good fit. So for me, it was always, well, how do you think I can best contribute with the understanding of the individuals that are already on your board, as well as whatever the vision is for moving forward? Where can I fit and where can I make the biggest impact? And sometimes, there'll be reference either to existing skill sets that you may have referenced or an interest. And that's really a great opportunity to, one, get a view in terms of how the organization's perspective on you and how you'll fit, and also to see if that aligns with what you are thinking about within that organization. And I also think that short-term strategy is also very important because that's going to help to identify how you as a board member will be able to contribute. So those were actually a few of the important points I learned along the way that helped to inform the decision as to whether or not the board could be a good fit for me.
That flagged a bunch more things I just wanted to mention. As you can see, I could go on forever about all the things I want you to think about before joining a board. But, the culture of the organization and how you partner with the organization is so important. And that means not just taking a good look at the LinkedIn profiles of everybody on the board, but be sure and pull the LinkedIn profile of the executive director. When you go on the website for the organization, there's going to be this very rosy description of who the executive director is, and it's not going to really tell you that much. It's going to tell you what they want you to know about the executive director. So be sure and go on LinkedIn and pull the executive director. Have they had 5 jobs in the last 3 years? What's that all about? You're not going to find that in the bio on the nonprofit's website. So how long do they tend to stay in a job? Why have they bounced around so much if they have bounced around a lot? Have they perhaps been in this job for 40 years? If they've been in the job for a really long time and they're planning on retiring in the next year, this could be a very exciting time to join because you're going to be part of bringing in the new leadership, which is great. It could also be very frustrating over the course of the next 12 months when they don't want to change anything about how they're doing things because they've been doing it the same way for 40 years. Now, some of the most innovative executive directors I know in the city have been in their job for a really long time. So don't just assume because they've been in the job for a long time, they're not going to be innovative, because that's not true. But it is something you want to ask as you're talking to people. How innovative is Matt? Because it looks like he's been here for a very long time. And something to think about if you're joining a board where they're bringing in a new executive director, it can be very exciting because you're part of that change. But they could bring somebody in who is not a good cultural fit with you, and you just really don't like this person. So you are taking a little bit of a roll of the dice. I think it's worth it. I think it's very exciting to join when the new team is coming in. But you are taking a little bit of the roll of the dice in terms of who is that new person going to be, and are they going to be somebody that you work well with? one of the questions that that has come up is, was there a hurdle you had going from being an employee of a company versus a board member? Was that hard for you to make that transition? And Ashish touched on that a little bit. He works at a great company and he's a very senior guy who's well respected. And he says, they jump. Or at least he hopes they do. But it's not like that when you're a nonprofit board member. First of all, it's not your job to run the staff. That is not your job. Your job is, the only staff member you're supposed to be in charge of is hiring and firing the executive director. And then your executive director is supposed to be managing his or her own staff. So that can be frustrating. Some of the other things that can be surprising when you go from a staff role to a board member role.
I find that the nonprofit world often moves much more slowly than the corporate world. So if you've never experienced that culture and that speed before, that's something that you need to prepare yourself for. There's a very different speed at which stuff gets done, in part because you need buy-in from a lot of people, and sometimes it takes a long time to get there. But that more often than not seems to be true with nonprofits.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's interesting when you come from a large organization where there's kind of almost unlimited resources to move things quickly and a kind of well-developed process to do that. And you move to working either on a startup or even a smallish or even mid-sized board. The staffs are very limited, right? So even if they have the best of intentions and being able to do things quickly and very efficiently, unfortunately, you have to just temper your expectations and know that the resources are very limited and they're already stretched. So it was a little bit of an exercise for me to take it down a notch and just temper my expectations in terms of how quickly things could be done.
Oh, Djena, you froze again. Okay, Djena, you froze
quickly,
again.
We could pivot or put something up.
A corollary to that was very nice. I was leading one of these panels last week and somebody said, and I have to admit I hadn't heard this before, but it was wonderful, and I bet it does happen a lot, is that someone said, we always talk about bringing private sector expertise to the nonprofit boards that we serve on. And, the private sector, we know how to do things so much better. We can bring it to those people in the nonprofit community who are not incompetent, but as we discussed, they just have less resources, so things move differently. But the corollary of that is a lot of times you will learn something in the nonprofit community through your board service that you can then take back to your private sector job. And that happens more often than you realize. It's actually, it happens quite a lot that you're going to learn a different way of solving a problem in the nonprofit sector that might be very, very helpful for you when you go back to your private sector job. I mean, Matt, do you have an example of that maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I can think of many examples where, the reality is budgets, time, staff are usually your constraints. And in some ways, being on a board or being on a staff either of a nonprofit is a lot like being part of a startup where you're trying to figure out how do I do things as inexpensively as possible, but still be as efficient as possible. The only difference here is that you often have a lot of stakeholders too, because you might have whomever the nonprofit's serving, so that could be a community itself. You might have corporate partners, you have the board, donors, staff. These are all different groups that you need buy-in. And so you really learn, I know a lot of people who have learned by being on a board how to find consensus efficiently rather than trying to kind of dictate this is what I want done. And often as long as you have diverse opinions amongst those groups, the consensus actually ends up being sometimes a lot better than what you envisioned in your head.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Matt, because that is something you learn so well serving on a nonprofit board is how to build consensus. And that is such a skill that you can then take back to your day job. Now, Ashish, your board service is so dramatically different than your day job. I am sure that you have learned things from working in the food rescue space that you have taken back to your day job. Is there an example you might have?
No, it's very much night and day from what I do in my day job. And it was an eye-opening experience. I think as Djena rightly pointed out, a lot of us on this phone and are kind of hard charging type A personalities and professionals. And when we devote ourselves to a project where we go at a certain speed and just naturally expect the world to follow at that speed. And, as Matt indicated, you've got to temper expectations, right? There's a different speed and cadence that you've got to get used to. Just because you've decided in your head that the right answer is X doesn't mean that everyone else is there. You've got to build a consensus and you've got to take a different approach to things. And I think, the lesson I take away, which is, I think, apt for sort of Stern alums, it's sort of like your junior year or senior year group projects where, you're in a team. There is no leader. You need consensus. And it's very different than your professional lives now where you have a more senior position. At the end of the day, there's someone that makes a decision and everyone just marches to it. You're back to the group project days of Stern. And you need to, even though you may be more senior or more junior, you need to get everyone on board to push forward because otherwise people are just disengaged. They'll just say no. And it's a nonprofit. You can't will it to happen because there's only so many hours in a day. And so it's good muscle memory. It forces a different skill set out that is then, frankly, directly applicable to your day job to be more inclusive and stuff like that. So it's definitely something that I think people have to get used to and expect, because again, the nonprofit world operates just at a very different cadence and speed with a very different skill set to align to.
Okay. I promised I was going to open up to questions now, so I'm going to start ticking through. We've got a bunch of questions that came through. Let me, we'll just start ticking through them here. All right. Djena, somebody wanted to know the name of the board training program that you did.
I knew someone was going to ask me that. It's been a number of years. I'm pretty sure. Am I okay? I believe that it was called Board Connect, but I don't know that it's still around because this was circa early 2000s. So not sure. Check it out, Board Connect.
Okay, so that's that. Okay, we got asked that a bunch of time. Well. But people wanted to know about the difference between being on a corporate board and a nonprofit board. They are very different. One of the biggest differences I could tell you is when you're on a nonprofit board, you are raising money, giving money. In a corporate board, you are likely getting paid money to serve on a board. So that's a big difference. Okay. We have a question about what is the range of the financial commitment you would be making on a board. I can tell you if you're somebody who's based here in New York, most of the boards that are recruiting in the New York area want something around $5,000 a year. That is probably the median. There are boards that ask for less. There are even some boards that ask for no money at all. That's very rare. Then there are boards that ask for substantially more. And just so you know, as we discussed a little bit earlier, just because it's a big board with all sorts of big names on it and a big budget doesn't necessarily mean that board's more expensive. That could be a very affordable board. So, you want to ask that question and don't assume that it's going to be too expensive for you because it's a big board, or that a small startup board is not going to ask for a lot of money. Okay. People are asking outside of New York, if you can't work with BoardAssist, how might you be able to find a board? So just so you know, we are based here in New York City, BoardAssist. We work with organizations that are serving locally, nationally, and internationally. So if you are not in New York, we might still very easily be able to work with you to find a board that's serving nationally or internationally that could work for you. Another great website to go to is volunteermatch.org. It's one word, volunteermatch.org. They also are a nonprofit. They also are a free service, and you can look for opportunities to either volunteer or serve on a board there. Okay, I got a question about if you're a board and you're looking to grow your board. So you can post if you are an organization and you're looking to grow your board, you can post opportunities to join your board on Volunteer Match. And of course, you can go to BoardAssist as well. We would be very happy to help you. There's a question about joining boards. If you don't have a lot of money to give earlier in your career, I would say the more affordable boards tend to be on volunteermatch.org. So that's a great place to look if you're early in your career and you don't have a lot of money to spend. I don't want to pretend like $1,000 a year is not a significant amount of money, but to some people, it can be surprising that you can really join a great board for $1,000 a year. So just keep in mind what boards may be more affordable than you realize. There's a question about, can you give your expertise versus giving money? Most boards want what's called time, talent, and treasure. This can be like a very disappointing and surprising thing for some people. They're a lawyer, they're an accountant, they're like, well, I don't want to give a lot of money, but I'm going to give a lot of pro bono hours. That should be fine. Well, in most cases, it's not fine because the public relations person gave their time for free and the marketing person gave their time for free and everybody else is giving their time for free. And I'm, as I mentioned before, I'm a recovering lawyer myself. Lawyers and accountants, we're very used to charging by the hour. So we have this sense of, well, we're giving our time for free. Do you know what I bill out at? That should be worth something. But you have to keep in mind that everybody else is giving their time for free too. And also keep in mind that nonprofits need money to do the important work they're doing. So they are very much looking to the board for help with that. There's a question about risk protection when you're serving on a board. Matt answered this a little bit before. You definitely want to find out if the board that you're talking to has D&O, directors and officers, insurance. It's very affordable for most organizations. So if you're talking to a board and they don't have D&O insurance, you might be the one who says, you know what, I'll just write that check myself. I'll come on and that'll be part of what I do is I'll pay that insurance. It might be under $1,000 a year. You could be very surprised at how affordable D&O can be. I'll tell you, the BoardAssist D&O is $833 a year. It's not that expensive. So don't let that be the reason you don't join. And another thing I would just say is whether you own or rent, most homeowners or home renters insurance policies have a rider that's already included in there for nonprofit board service. You don't have to pay any extra money, and there's a super good chance that your renter's policy or your homeowner's policy does pick up nonprofit board service. That is very different than corporate board service. That they're not going to pick up. But nonprofit board service, they almost definitely do. So just you'd want to ask your broker about that and find out more. I got the question of if you wanted a list of questions you should ask before you join a board. Where might you find that? Well, I'm so glad you asked. If you go on the BoardAssist, Ashish is laughing. If you go on the BoardAssist.org website, we have put all these questions in one place. We have our booklet, which you can get from the FAQ tab of every page of the website. You can also go on YouTube and type in the word BoardAssist, and there's a short video that has all those questions in one place. Answer that. Just trying to get through these quickly so we can go back to talking, but I did promise I would answer all the questions. Okay. Bear with me, we're almost there. Oh, while I'm looking at these questions, maybe somebody could talk about what are the board committees? People in the audience were curious about what sort of committees there would be on a board.
It probably depends on what the nonprofit is. But common ones you'd find would be some sort of marketing, communications, possibly some sort of strategy group, possibly some sort of governance group. And governance often also is dealing with bringing on board members. Development group might be something that you see, so that's fundraising. And then depending on the nonprofit, you may have something that's more program oriented. But that's what I've seen in my experience.
And finance.
In finance. Sorry. Yes.
Right. That's a big one. We have a question about DEI, and I really wanted to talk about that because that's so much on everyone's brain right now. So on the topic of DEI, what's happened ever since the murder of George Floyd has been that a lot of organizations woke up and said, wow, we really need to be focused more on diversity on our board. So they've been talking about this for a very long time, but some boards, even though they were well-intentioned, were not really putting the elbow grease in to see those results. So that has changed. At least in New York, which is the board community I'm the most familiar with, people are very, very, very focused on bringing in new and different voices of every sort. So it can be LGBTQ, it could be generational diversity, it could be racial diversity, it could be we want more people who are first in their family to college, all sorts of diversity. The person who wrote in is concerned about the situation where they're being valued only for the diversity that they are bringing to the table. And so that's a very good question to ask. And I feel like Georgia did a very good job of alluding to that about half an hour ago. Like, why is it that you want me? That was, I just love when Georgia did that. So, you want to push, if you were going to add, if you're looking at the website of the current board and everybody is white and you're going to be the first person of color on that board, you want to find out, first of all, why am I the first person of color on this board? How did this happen? Why do you want me? Is it just because of the diversity I'm bringing to the table? And that might be fine with you. You might feel like this is a really important step. And if they only want me because I'm bringing diversity to the table, I know how awesome I'm going to be. I know how much my voice is going to matter. So I'm fine with that. Or you may be offended by that. So you want to find out, why it is that they want you now, what they are doing about diversity. And it's very, very good question to ask in your board interview process. What is your organization doing right now at DEI? As Ashish was saying, what's the short-term, medium plan on your thinking on DEI? Somebody asked, if your company's asking you to join a nonprofit board, how much is a reasonable amount for them to donate in your name? Most New York City companies aren't terrific about donating anything for your board service, but what a lot of them will do is match. So they won't pick up the entire amount, but if you're paying $2,500 a year, they'll put in $2,500 a year. Just one thing I would ask you to think about is if you're joining a board with, there's some companies, if you work for George Soros, he has 3-for-1 matching. So if you put in $2,500, he puts in $7,500. That's great. But now you've joined a board where you're giving $10,000 a year. And what happens if you leave? Now you're only giving $2,500 a year. That can be uncomfortable. So think about what that means when you're joining a board where a big piece of the give-get is being picked up by your employer. We're almost done with these questions, so we can get back to talking. Somebody asked if you're going through the BoardAssist process, how does it work? So somebody also asked, how do you get the password to the BoardAssist protected protected searches pages? So anybody who's interested in working with us, just email me at info@boardassist.org. We'll send you some information, get you started. We'll send you the password to the site. There'll be a questionnaire so that you can tell us everything that we need to know about working with you. And I would encourage you, even if you're doing this on your own, to still go on the site because there are all these tools that are there for you that hopefully will help you firm up what you want to be thinking about. There's a question about, is there a website you can go on that sees boards currently looking for members? That would be the BoardAssist website. Or you could also go on volunteermatch.org. But as Ashish pointed out, it's not organized the way we are, where you can screen for, I just want organizations that are charter schools that are in this neighborhood that are asking for this amount of money. So, but Volunteer Match is a great website, and Erica did put that up for you. There's a question about, will there be follow-up? Will I be sending materials to all of you on how to join a board and next steps? So just so you know, to protect your privacy, I don't know who's on this call. If you're interested in learning more about board service, please email me at info@boardassist.org. I promise I won't be spamming you or like bothering you all the time. Like we send you an opening package with information on working with us, but then we step out and wait for you to move forward. We know you're all very busy and we don't want to be too pushy, even though, as I said earlier, there are 1.8 million nonprofit board seats opening up in this country every year, and we really need your help. And we need you to do what everybody on this panel has done, which is join multiple boards. So if you're interested, I don't know how to contact you. You'll have to contact me. There was one last question, then we can go back to talking about what was that median number again for a New York board, and that median number is 5,000. And again, that doesn't mean that there are plenty of organizations that would not really embrace having a terrific Stern alum on their board for less than that. Okay, so we got those out of the way. So if we could do one last round with everyone speaking, I always love to end with this question because I think we always get interesting responses. Ashish, what does a great board member look like?
To me, a great board member has two qualities, and that's a great attitude and willing to give great effort. And what I mean by that, and obviously this depends on the board, but just because someone has a high profile title doesn't mean they'll be a great board member. It's got to fit the organization, and someone with a high profile title that pontificates a lot, throws out a lot of just crazy stuff, it is not very helpful. You want someone that's passionate about the organization, has an attitude that'll work with people, and is willing to give a lot of effort. It doesn't matter if you ideally like the skill set to match up, but that's okay if it doesn't. We're all capable, smart individuals. You could repurpose skill set. You could expand people's horizon. Those are the two things. If you don't have, especially for nonprofit, we're not getting paid for this, right? This is a side project. You're doing this out of the goodness of your heart. You're sending emails on a Saturday morning or doing late night calls on a Thursday night. You do it because you care. And so if you don't have the right attitude and want to give the effort, it's usually not a great fit.
I love that. Thank you, Ashish. Matt, what would you say a great board member looks like?
I think Ashish actually did it really well. I think it's somebody who really understands what the organization needs based on the conversations that they've had, and feels like they can collaborate with the organization to make that happen. I think collaborate's kind of that key word. The bad board members are the ones that come in and say, this is what I want done and how I want it done. It very rarely pans out well for anyone.
No, that's so true. And, we had this big summit in the fall, which if you guys go on YouTube and put up BoardAssist, you'll see the summit on BoardAssist nonprofit best practices. And we had some really, really leading board members in the city on the board of the Med and universities and hospitals. And when they were asked this question, the very first thing that one of the panelists said was a great board member is a cheerleader. They are a cheerleader for the organization. And the person who responded with that answer was Jennifer Nason, who is the global head of banking at JP Morgan. So you might have thought she would have had like something that was more in the weeds than that. But she said, no, I've been on a lot of boards. And at the end of the day, the best board members are cheerleaders for the organization. Going to what she said. Djena, what would you add in terms of what a great board member looks like?
I was thinking about all the things that we talked about in terms of, opportunities and challenges working with boards. I think at the end of the day, you really just have to be passionate about the purpose of the organization. And if you're passionate about the purpose of the organization, you're willing to, I would say roll up your sleeves, but I'll stick with the P's and go with pull up your sleeves. Pull up your sleeves to help that organization pursue their purpose, right? That's the goal. And at that point, you're willing to open your Rolodex. You're willing to do a call on Saturday mornings. You're willing to help the staff. You're willing to do different things when you're truly passionate about that purpose. So I would say start there and then go forward.
And Georgia, what would you add? Although it's going to be hard to add much, they like nailed that question.
They did. It is tough. I say, part of the thing with being on a board is the fact that you are doing something that you love because you're there without being paid, right? So potentially you may enjoy what you're doing on the board even more than you enjoy the work you are doing at your day job. And not only are you not being paid, you are paying to be there, right? So you certainly should be fully vested either in the organization's mission. So the passion for the work is very critical because there has to be something there that continues to motivate you to help to drive that organization forward, do the work that you're being asked to, sometimes stepping out of your comfort zone. So your contribution is certainly a lot more than financial, but you have to be connected in order to be willing to do the work continuously and to remain as an active board member.
Yeah. The one thing I would want to just add really quickly, and I know we're coming up on the end of time, the one other thing that I think is important for everyone on this call, and you're on the call because you're interested in joining a nonprofit board. I got to tell you, like, I looked and I went on a BoardAssist website and I went to a couple other websites and I saw these things, and then life got in the way, right? Work gets busy, stuff with family gets busy, apathy kicks in. You're like, you should do it. And you realize, unlike your professional job where your boss is going to come ask you a question, you have a deadline to meet, there's no natural follow-up here. It's got to be self-motivation, self-starter. And so the really, I think, important thing for people who are truly interested is put some deadlines on yourself, make a commitment that, you know what, by this date, I'm actually going to go through this, make a short list and set up a couple of phone calls with a couple of organizations because, as Cynthia started the call with, there's 1.8 million board jobs in a year. Everyone on this call, this webinar, would be in high demand, and there's a fit there for everyone. The problem is the follow through, just sticking with it. So you actually have some calls and getting into the flow. Getting in is the hardest thing. Just finding the right match, and then things kind of take on itself. So just wanted to add that.
I'm so thrilled. I mean, he's like a plant. I really, I could not agree with that more enough, obviously. And, a lot of people make New Year's resolutions. This is a year that I am going to be the change. I am going to do this now. And this is time to do it. We're still in January of the new year. Like, keep that New Year's resolution. Get this process started. You got 5 days left in this month to get the process started. And, on that note, before I turn it back to Erica to take us out for the day, a lot of people ask, well, so what do you do to prepare for these board interviews? What should I be doing? And I feel like we've just given you the keys in this last round with this last question. When you go on your board interviews, the thing that these boards are going to be looking for the most is that you are enthusiastic about their mission. How do you show that enthusiasm? By being prepared. So please don't go on a board interview where you have not read every single word of that organization's website. Don't sit down and say, tell me about what you do. No, how much passion do you have for their mission if you didn't do your homework and find out what they do? Go on that guidestore.org website and pull their financials so you can understand. Like, the website might talk about them doing all these different programs, but the financials are going to tell you like how much money they spend where and what they're doing. And so, go on GuideStar, pull their annual report, which is you're going to see that either on GuideStar as well as the financials or on their website. Go on their website, read everything, and don't expect them to tell you what they do. Like, expect them to take it to the next level. But if you show up unprepared, those are the calls I get where, like, Cynthia, how could you send me this person? They just clearly don't care at all about our mission. They want to see that you are passionate about their mission and that you show that passion by being prepared. We have 1 minute left. Does anybody have anything important that we didn't cover? How much could we cover in 90 minutes? I think you guys did an incredible job of covering a huge amount of information. But anyone who wants to add before we give back to Erica? Okay, Erica, thank you so much for putting this together. I'm assuming you're coming back on. I don't know.
Erica asked me to step in and help close us out.
Okay. Matt, close us out.
Yeah, so I would say on behalf of BALA and the LGBT alumni group, thank you so much for joining us. We hope this has answered some of your questions about trying to find a board. Probably not all of them, but do seek out the resources. And my understanding is that a recording of this should be posted in about 2 weeks. So if you need to come back to this, look for it then. And we look forward to seeing you at future events.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks,
Bye,
everyone.
everybody. I hope to hear
Thanks,
from
everyone.
everyone. 1.8 million.
Thank you.